I'm not actually seeing any being submitted at this time, and that actually is a little surprising because we've gotten so much enthusiastic feedback and requests for the Q&A that I thought we'd get some more. But I've got one that somebody in the class asked me just in between. It says, if Noah was the only righteous man, did that mean his family wasn't righteous and they were saved for Noah's sake to repopulate the earth? And my view is that they were saved from the flood because they got on the ark, not because they were righteous. Anybody who got on the ark would have been saved. There wasn't a requirement to be righteous. There was only a requirement to get on the ark. The invitation was to the entire population. Anybody could have gotten on. We see shortly after the flood that one of the sons maybe wasn't quite as righteous as maybe the others. And so, that salvation wasn't getting on the ark, eternal salvation. It was simply salvation or being saved from dying in the flood, which is the first death experience. So anybody who got on the ark survived. Anybody who didn't. But it's not a testimony of righteousness just because they got on the ark. But the Bible's testimony of the righteous question is that only Noah was the only righteous man left on the earth at the time. So, yes.
So Shem, Ham, and Japheth were born, if you do the chronology, after God called Noah to build the ark.
Right. So you're saying at the time he was called, he was the only righteous man. We aren't told whether his kids were righteous or not because they were born sometime later. The indication of some of the behavior after the flood is over would indicate maybe one particular character wasn't as righteous as the others. That would be indicative of then a person not being so righteous getting on the ark. You can imply that. The point being is there wasn't an angel standing at the ark doing a biopsy of one's righteous character before they got on. The only requirement was to get on before the door closed.
Right.
And so it really isn't stated, but he was righteous, and I did not know that, so thanks for sharing that. Other questions, because I don't have any submitted online. We'll see if this actually ends up working out. Maybe we just will have a longer class, which I've been asked for. But we'll do this for a few weeks and see if people start submitting questions.
Yeah, I had a question. Last week you had mentioned what the lesson says this week, which is the definition of grace in here, which is unmerited favor, which I disagree with, but I was wondering what you would say grace is.
No, so I'm glad you brought that up. So when you hear the term unmerited favor, how do you hear it?
We don't really deserve it. Wicked as we are, but God loves us.
Okay, so the way it's traditionally heard is very much like that, and so there's I think that leads to the false conclusion that we have very little value to God. Okay, and that and the way I understand grace, the actual word means more along favorable action. It has an action connoted with it, work of God. So everything God does for our salvation is an evidence of grace. Holding back evil powers, that's grace. Working in the heart, that's grace. Sending Jesus to be our Savior, that's grace. Discipline, the Lord disciplines those he loves. So those difficult times and during the difficult trials, it leads to character development, that's grace. Every act of God is an act of grace. Now, the question about the unmerited portion, I think that I don't use that language because that language comes from the mindset of imperialism and human law, buying, selling, earning, and so forth. It leads people down this line. There's an aspect to it that there's some truth to it if you understand it correctly, and this is how it's correct. We did not, if you want to use a medical model, we have a terminal condition, and we have a free remedy offered us, and we did not create or develop the remedy. It was given freely because of the one who loves us, developed it for us. That would be an act of grace to provide it on our part. Meriting it, in that sense, would be that we went out and we paid for it. We did the research. We developed the antidote. We built the lab. In other words, we did something that contributed to the solution. Thus, we merited the solution, or we earned it in some other way. We went off and did some great feat. In many of the pagan religions, you go off and do some great quest of some kind. And if you do the great quest, then that act of questing or whatever it is you did, that somehow earns then the beneficence of the deity and so forth. So the idea here that we didn't do anything, we receive it. But the idea that's false is that we don't deserve it in who we are. That's how it comes out. You're a worm. You're scum. You're so beneath the Lord. That type of thing. So, but that's not true. We deserve because of who we are to God, not because of what we've done. And any parent who has a child who has gone into any type of, let's say, disobedience and got themselves in some type of harm, whether it's physical injury because they jumped off the barn roof and they said, don't jump off the barn roof, and they're crying with a broken leg or anything else, the parent doesn't say, you don't deserve my favor, okay? Because your conduct, you'll need to earn back my favor. There's none of that. Who they are, they deserve it. Their conduct certainly doesn't, but who they are does. And who they are is, you're my child and I love you. You deserve my intervention because of who you are. So I think that particular comment lends itself to creating aspects of the relationship with God that undermine our trust and confidence in him. So I don't like that language. And let's see here. I might have just, yes.
So I had an online question.
Okay.
Somebody wanted you to go over perhaps the concept of to whom the ransom is paid, where it talks about we've been bought with a price or we've been ransomed.
So I just got I'm going to do that. And I just got a text from somebody who knows me and saying that the comment field, Dean, if you're listening, is not working, and that the questions they're submitting are not coming up in our. So it was our first weekend using it. Little glitches we'll have to work out. So we'll look at that. So and the question was.
It's talking about we've been bought with a price.
Oh yeah, the
ransom.
Okay, the ransom price. Okay, it's a metaphor, but what do ransoms do? And so go back to your law model. I mean, if you get stuck, step back and go, what law lens am I looking through? If I'm looking through imposed law, ransoms are arbitrary payments given to somebody who holds somebody in hostage. Somebody has to be paid off in order to let go who they're holding. This is how human systems work. If I design law, though, then you go, okay, ransoms are the price necessary to free one held in bondage. Well, okay, what is it that actually holds sinners in bondage? What is it that holds us? There's two things. Lies, that's right. We are held in the bondage of lies as long as we believe them. And there's something that will set us free from that, though. Jesus said it, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So the first price or ransom price is the price of truth. But even when we see the truth about God and the lies have been dispelled, we see that he's trustworthy. Are we free of sin? Are we saved yet? There's something else that's needed. What do we need? That's good. Love. We need love. We need the law written on the heart and mind. We need to be reborn. We need to be recreated. We need to have the a heart of stone taken out, the heart of flesh put in. We need to be, this is the metaphor. We need the character of Christ, all the metaphors. We need the carnal to die and a new life that we receive from Christ. No longer I that lives, but Christ lives in me. Okay, so we need a righteous life. Do you have a righteous life to give? And I don't mean a righteous life in a legal accounting system. I mean a righteous life. Ellen White says in Christ's Object Lessons that when our thoughts are brought into harmony with his thoughts, that when we surrender to him, our thoughts are brought into harmony with his, our desires are united with his, we live his life. This is what it means to be covered in the robe of righteousness. And so the second price is a new nature, new heart, new mind that we did not develop, a sinless one, that Christ developed. So we need the truth to restore us to trust, and in trust we receive the life of Christ with new motives and new desires that he developed as a human being for us. As the second Adam, second head, we align with him. He's the vine, we're the branches, and his life flows in us. We begin to live out his principles. And so there's a price to be paid to us. But who receives the price? Does the Father need more truth to win him out of the lies he's in? No. Who needed the truth? We did. So the truth price is paid to us. And does the Father need a new sinless nature? Does Gabriel need a new sinless nature? Who needs a new sinless nature? We do. So there is a ransom price to be paid for our salvation, but it's the price reality requires. Truth to win us free from the lies, to restore us to trust, and in trust we open the heart and we receive the mind and heart of Christ. It's no longer I live, but Christ lives in me. We're reborn or recreated with the law written in the heart. That's the price that had to be paid. And Christ achieved that through his victory on earth, revealing, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, revealing the truth, and taking up our nature, damaged by Adam, and curing it, fixing it, healing it, eradicating the infection, tempted in every way just like we are, yet without sin, Hebrews 4:15. And we are tempted, we're dragged away and enticed by our own evil desires, James 1:15, I believe. So Jesus had a humanity that tempted him. In Gethsemane, he had feelings and anguished and tempted to act in self-interest. Don't go through the cross. That's selfishness. That's fear. That's survival drives. That's the carnal nature. He had it, that he assumed. Yet, he chose to do what? With his humanity, he chose to do what? No one can take my life, I give it freely. So rather than acting in self-interest, he acts selflessly. And those who seek to save their life will lose it, but those who lose it will find it. Thus, at the cross, he destroyed with love fear and selfishness in the humanity. And he rose on the third day in a new humanity, cleansed and healed and restored back to God's original design, becoming, Hebrews 5:9, once he was made perfect, he became the source of salvation for all who obey him. Made perfect? Wasn't he always? No, he's always sinless. Bible perfection is about maturity of character, and that required a human being face the temptation and overcome perfectly. Jesus did that for us, and we receive that. So the ransom price is the price of truth and the sinless nature or character that we receive as a gift when we trust him, and it's paid to us, restoring us back in to harmony with God's design and law. It's brilliant. Yes, it's really great what God has done. Yes?
I have a couple more good ones.
Okay.
So this one's talking about kind of the infection of survival of the fittest throughout creation. He says, I'm under the impression that God created both the Garden of Eden and all of our ecosystems that can accommodate sin and death. Did God create the animals and insects that kill and eat each other for survival?
No, actually. Take that back. Did he create the animals? The ones that we see mostly, I believe he created. Did he create them in their current condition? He didn't create them in their condition any more than he created Adam and Eve in their condition where they would kill each other. So no, the infection of the survival drive is the law of sin and death. It's driven by fear. And nature has been mutated on a biological, physiological, as well as a characterological level. Viruses, I got a blog on our website, and you go in and just type in viruses, and you'll find several blogs. One of them, I describe how viruses were not part of God's design. Viruses are part of Satan's infection. Physical viruses, just like viruses in a computer virus. Okay, a computer virus is designed to do what? Damage the code. Okay, viruses, the physical viruses, are designed to damage the code in living beings. That's what they're designed to do. And if you think about the people who write operating systems for computers, they do not write viruses for their operating systems. Some attacker examines it and tries to figure out a way to destroy or damage. And Satan is the author of all that damages. So in Eden, there were no thorns, there were no thistles, there were no noxious plants or poisonous herbs or poisonous mushrooms. Nothing that would harm was there. All of that is a perversion of creation that has occurred through direct action. But Mike has given me some insights recently. But it's just the cauldron of the pressures of the survival process happening to God's creation. God created his species, his living organisms to adapt and change based on experiences, adaptation. And once sin entered, the adaptations were caustic and hostile, and animals adapted and changed very quickly in order to survive in a new, not loving, but threatening and hostile environment. So you have all these adaptations that have occurred because of sin. God did not create frogs with poisonous skin, for instance.
Follow-up question to that that's really been about at conversion, the physiological and biological epigenetic. I know you've talked about this. I love your part about at the judgment, the fixing of the DNA. can you kind of go over, would you mind going over some of that?
Okay, so first, what I understand God promises is here on the earth today is new hearts and right spirits, meaning mature, Christ-like character, such that, Revelation chapter 12, verse 11, that these are they who do not love their life so much as to shrink from death. They don't love their life so much. They're not afraid to die. They'll stand for truth, like Daniel in the lion's den example, okay? Meaning they're not controlled by their survival drives anymore. They won't hurt others to protect themselves. Love and truth has replaced the survival drive as the mode of action. Character maturity is what we're promised now. We are not promised new biology until this mortal puts on immortality and this corruption puts on incorruption. That means that despite how healthy we become spiritually or diet-wise and lifestyle-wise, we're still within a mortal body that will age and eventually decay and die on this planet. Or if we have certain disease states that are maybe deeply genetically driven, they will not be corrected within the biology we have, even if we become new creatures in Christ. This is important because many of my patients would say schizophrenia or bipolar. They wonder, well, they've given their heart to the Lord. They have the joy of His salvation, but they still struggle with the illness because the biology that causes that will not be fixed until the second coming. Does that make sense? But underneath the genetic limitations of our current biology, our DNA is constantly changing its expression, epigenetically altering which genes are turned on and which genes are turned off by life experiences. By the God you worship, your worship patterns will alter your gene expression. By the foods that you eat, by the programming that you watch, by the experiences of life. People who've gone through trauma have altered DNA that alter their resilience. So they're less resilient than people who haven't gone through trauma. It shuts down some of the genes that allow for neuroplasticity. People, and the earlier the trauma, the more epigenetic expression problems that happen. It doesn't mean the person still can't learn and change. They can. People who've gone through trauma go to therapy and they get better and they learn and they change. It just takes longer and they're a little slower than they would be had they not been through the trauma. But our brains are constantly in a state of flux. Older brains, we show that if you engage in new learning, studying and learning something you don't already know, reinforcing something you know is not new learning. Learning something you don't know. The brain will turn on a gene. Its acronym is REST, a REST gene, that produces a protein that allows for greater branching and connecting of new pathways, improved memory, organization of thought processing, and it actually has protective effects from preventing dementia as you age if you do new learning. So the point you're making, the point I think you're trying to make is that healthy lifestyle choices, spiritually, coming to Christ, getting rid of the fear-inducing worldviews and survival drives, will activate love circuits, calm fear circuits, epigenetically turn down inflammatory genes in our body, reduce our risk of cancers, reduce our risk of viral infections. It actually makes our immune systems more capable of fighting viral infections when we have the love circuits active and not the fear circuits active. And what else turns on those love circuits and reduces our risk of viral infections? Social connection. When we're socially isolated, we epigenetically diminish our immune response and make us more vulnerable to infection. So it makes a lot of sense that we want to isolate and not be around people. No, this is, again, back to what I said earlier in class today. When you violate God's design laws, you always make matters worse. And we're living in a world today where violating God's design laws for ourselves and our society and our relationships are esteemed and valued. And people who stand up for God's design and His methods are ridiculed and deplatformed and silenced and accused, even from people in the church who have bought in to these very distorted worldviews that are being promulgated on us now. So I got off on a little side there.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have another one.
Okay.
How does having the brain operating at the quantum level impact a deeper understanding of how God works or salvation itself?
So let's just state right now, we don't know a lot about the quantum level. Well, let's just say that right now. Anything we're going to say about the quantum level is going to be theoretical and speculative, and there may be evidence for it. And there is evidence for it. And I've done a lecture on the quantum mechanics of our brain, but it's emerging data, and we can't say anything with absolute certainty. But just as God is the God of the big things, and if you understand physics, there's the quantum versus Newtonian. Newtonian physics is the physics of the big things. Friction, motion, acceleration, the stuff that we're familiar with every day in our lives. That's the Newtonian physics. God is the God of Newtonian physics, the laws that govern friction, motion, gravity, and all these different things. Those are his laws that he built. God is also the God of the infinitely small things, the infinitely small matters of particles that make up all the building blocks that become the big things. On an infinitely small scale, matter actually gets down into waveform and energy, and matter becomes, on the quantum level, both a point in place and time and a wave moving through space and time. And there's an interesting quotation from Ellen White. Let me find it for you. This is the advantage of having my computer. I can get a quote that I can't quite remember. At least I think I can. And she talks about this.
She talks about harmonies or...
Yeah, I have to, yep, I'm going to find it for you. I think it's right here in this one. It's opening. And I have a whole lecture that I've done on this. We talk about prayer. I want to read this quote, and then when I talk to you about... There it is. Okay, this is from manuscript 22, 1897. It is God's plan that every part of his government shall be depend on every other part, the whole as a wheel within a wheel, working with entire harmony. He moves upon human forces, causing his spirit to touch invisible chords, and the vibration rings through the extremity of the universe. Now understand string theory. String theory on the quantum level are these invisible chords that go through every element of the entire universe, and their vibration, depending on their frequency, is what causes the mass of the individual particles of matter that make up the physical matter that we make. Ellen White was describing quantum mechanics and quantum physics before the quantum mechanics even were understood by the physicist. So it's quite profound. And so if we understand God as the God of the big things, and then God is God of little things, think about this for a moment. Can a person who is godless and has no faith in God at all use the physics of big things to set a bone, to suture a laceration? In other words, to act in ways that bring healing to somebody without acknowledging God whatsoever because of the laws of the big things that govern those things? Yes, they can. In the same way, the law of the small things, we have research, and I have this whole lecture, we're not going to go into it right now, but that when you pray, now, oh, by the way, law of the big things, can a surgeon, though, also invite God in to be part of the process and ask God to be there with them and bring his healing energy to the process as well? So the laws of God work whether a person asks him or doesn't ask him, okay? But when we ask God, I think we have better outcomes than when we don't. The law of the small things show that when you pray for somebody, that if you pray with two things, generated love in your heart. If you don't have love generated, it won't work. And willful intention. If you do both of those things, there are measurable outcomes in double-blind studies on all kinds of things. We can affect DNA conformation in blood in test tube settings. We can focus on one test tube next to the other, miles away, and pray with love and good intention that the conformation will change in one but not the other, and it will. So we have the capacity. We've done studies like this, praying for healing of patients, double-blinded, for months, and the outcome is that if you pray with love and good intention for 15 minutes a day for people, you can actually alter and have improved health outcomes that are measurable by blinded chart reviewers years down the road. They can actually go back and see the difference in the ones who were being prayed for and the ones who weren't. We've done studies on animals with carcinomas that are 100% lethal in the animal, that if they're given to a faith practitioner who will hold them and pray for them, hold the cage, not even touch them. Just pray over them 15 minutes a day with real intention and love that those cancers go into remission and those animals are cured, whereas the ones that are not getting the prayer die. It's very, very interesting and profound. And so my point is, you don't actually have to believe in God to use the physics of big things to bring healing on the big level. And in these various studies of faith, they had people who didn't believe in God at all. These were agnostics. They just instructed them to focus with love in your heart and real intention on the outcome that you want, and they still had the positive results. Because it's the quantum, the physics of little things. It doesn't mean there's not a God. People go, oh no, it proves there's no God. No, it doesn't prove there's no God, any more than physics of big things does. It just proves that God's laws are constant, and that we were created in his image, and he's given us certain capacities and powers to use those powers in governance of ourselves in harmony with his methods to bring healing to people. And so praying for people with love and good intention. So, interesting as well, understand the connection. If you pray to curse somebody, voodoo dolls and things like that, all the data on the quantum would show it doesn't work, because you actually have to have love in your heart in addition to real intentions. You have a hate in your heart with real intention. You don't be able, the evidence suggests that you can't access the quantum linkages to harm somebody. Only with love can you do it. Isn't that interesting?
Wow. Well,
Okay.
it heals animals. Why doesn't it heal people?
It does. In the studies, it does. I don't have time to go into all today, but there's studies that show that. Yes. And didn't I do that presentation in here sometime? Yes, I did. Yeah, I thought I did. Yeah. All righty. So any other questions? That's it. So we'll see if we can't get the kinks worked out for the guys online. We're moving that direction. We'll meet again here next week at 10 o'clock. Thank you all very much.